"You're just a gold digger who trapped our son," they sneered at the family dinner. I smiled and pulled out the shareholding documents. Turns out the poor nobody they mocked was their biggest investor, and I was about to call in their loans. The moment my mother-in-law, Eleanor, stood up at the family dinner and clinked her crystal wine glass with a silver spoon, I knew something devastating was coming. But I never imagined she'd use her own 65th birthday party to try to destroy my marriage. "Before we cut the cake," Eleanor announced, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I have something important to say about family values and the sanctity of marriage. My name is Amelia, and I'm 29 years old. I met my husband, Daniel, 3 years ago at a tech conference in Seattle. He was presenting his startup's new software, and I was there as an investor, though he didn't know that at the time. We bonded over shared interests in innovation and terrible conference coffee. He was brilliant, kind, and refreshingly unaware of my financial status. You see, I'd learned early in my career that money changes how people see you. When you're a woman who became a millionaire at 25 through strategic investments and building a venture capital firm from scratch, men either feel intimidated or see dollar signs. So I kept my success quiet, dressing modestly, driving a simple Toyota Camry, and living in a reasonable apartment downtown. Daniel fell in love with me thinking I was a mid-level analyst at a small firm. He'd pay for our dates, pridefully refusing whenever I offered to split the bill. "My parents raised me right," he'd say. "A man provides for his woman." I found his old-fashioned chivalry endearing, even if unnecessary. We married after 18 months of dating in a small ceremony. I wanted to tell him the truth about my wealth before the wedding, but every time I tried, something stopped me. Maybe it was the way he'd beam with pride when he talked about taking care of me, or how he'd work extra hours to save for little surprises. His innocence about our financial dynamic was oddly precious. Daniel's family, however, was a different story. The Harringtons owned a successful manufacturing company that had been in the family for 50 years. They weren't ultra-wealthy, but they were comfortable, the kind of old money mentality that looked down on anyone they deemed beneath their social status. From our first meeting, Eleanor made her disapproval clear. "So, Amelia," she'd said, looking at my off-the-rack dress with barely concealed disdain, "Daniel tells us you work in finance? How interesting. What exactly does an analyst do?" Her husband, Richard, was no better. During that first dinner, he'd grilled me about my family background, education, and prospects like I was interviewing for a position rather than dating his son. "State school, I see," he'd murmured when I mentioned my alma mater. "Well, I suppose not everyone can afford Princeton like our Daniel." Their daughter, Cassandra, was perhaps the worst. 2 years older than Daniel and married to a hedge fund manager, she never missed an opportunity to flaunt her wealth. "Oh, Amelia," she'd coo, "I love how you make such simple clothes look so brave. When you can't afford designer, confidence is really the best accessory." For 3 years, I endured their subtle and not-so-subtle insults. Every family gathering was a minefield of backhanded compliments and outright snobbery. They'd forget to set a place for me at holiday dinners, introduce me as Daniel's friend, even after we married, and constantly bring up his ex-girlfriend, a senator's daughter who would have been such a perfect match. Daniel, bless his heart, tried to defend me, but seemed oblivious to the worst of it. "They're just protective," he'd say. "They'll warm up once they get to know you better." But they never tried to know me. To them, I was the gold digger who'd trapped their precious son, the opportunist who'd somehow tricked him into marriage. Little did they know, I could buy their company 10 times over with my portfolio's quarterly dividends alone. The birthday dinner was held at the Harrington estate, a sprawling colonial that Eleanor never let anyone forget had been featured in Architectural Digest. 25 guests gathered in their formal dining room, all family friends and business associates who'd watched Daniel grow up. I'd actually put effort into my appearance that night, wearing a simple but elegant black dress and the pearl earrings Daniel had saved for months to buy me for our anniversary. Eleanor, of course, had something to say about it. "Amelia, dear," she'd whispered loudly enough for others to hear, Didn't you wear that same dress to last year's Christmas party? Well, I suppose classic never goes out of style when it's all you have. I smiled and nodded, used to her barbs. What I wasn't prepared for was what came next. As I was saying, Eleanor continued, standing at the head of the table, family values are so important, which is why Richard and I have been thinking about Daniel's future. My husband shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Mom, what are you talking about? Eleanor's smile was razor-sharp. Well, darling, your father and I have been discussing the company's succession plan. As you know, Harrington Industries has been in our family for generations. It needs to be protected. Protected from what? Daniel asked, but I already knew where this was going. From those who might not have the company's best interests at heart, Richard chimed in, staring directly at me. We've decided that to inherit your position as CEO, you'll need to meet certain conditions. Eleanor pulled out a document from behind her back. This is a post-nuptial agreement we've had drawn up. It ensures that in the event of a divorce, Amelia will receive nothing from the company or family assets. It's only fair, don't you think? After all, she contributed nothing to building our legacy. The room went silent. All eyes turned to me, some sympathetic, others curious to see how the gold digger would react. You want me to sign away rights to money I never asked for? I said calmly. Don't play innocent, Cassandra interjected. We all know why you married Daniel. This just makes sure you don't get rewarded for your scheming. Scheming? I repeated, my voice still level. Oh, please, Eleanor scoffed. A poor nobody from nowhere, working a dead-end job, suddenly lands one of the city's most eligible bachelors? We weren't born yesterday, dear. You're just a gold digger who trapped our son. That's when I smiled and reached into my purse. You know what? You're right. I should have been honest from the beginning. Daniel, honey, I'm sorry I kept this from you. I pulled out a leather folder and placed it on the table. I suppose now is as good a time as any for truth. What is that? Daniel asked, confused. These are shareholding documents, I said, opening the folder. As it turns out, I do have some connection to Harrington Industries. Richard leaned forward, his face already paling. What are you talking about? 3 years ago, Harrington Industries was facing bankruptcy. You needed a silent investor to inject capital without taking operational control. You went through Blue Mountain Capital for the investment, correct? Eleanor's wine glass trembled in her hand. How do you know about that? Because Blue Mountain Capital is my company, I said simply. I own 47% of Harrington Industries. You've been paying me dividends for 3 years. Those loans you took to expand the factory? I approved them. The board seat that's been mysteriously empty? That's mine. I just never bothered to claim it. The silence was deafening. I pulled out another document. This is particularly interesting, I continued. The loan agreements specify that if certain conditions aren't met, including maintaining family harmony and ethical business practices, I can call in the full amount immediately. That's $3.2 million, due within 30 days. Richard's face had gone from pale to purple. You're lying. This is some kind of trick. Call your CFO, I suggested. Ask him who AM Holdings is. Ask him who signs off on every major financial decision. Ask him who saved your company from bankruptcy while you were too proud to admit you'd mismanaged it into the ground. Daniel was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Amelia, is this true? Every word, I said softly. I'm worth approximately $42 million, not counting the value of my various investments. I fell in love with you because you were kind, brilliant, and treated me like a person instead of a bank account. I kept it secret because I wanted something real. But your apartment, your car. He stammered. I own the entire building, Daniel. I just live in a modest unit. As for the car, well, I also own a Bentley, a Tesla, and a classic Mustang. They're in storage. I drove the Camry because I didn't want to intimidate you. Eleanor finally found her voice. This is impossible. You're nobody. Your family has no money, no connections. My family were immigrants who worked 3 jobs to put me through school, I said proudly. I made my first $1 million developing and selling an app in college. I turned that into 10 million through strategic investments. I built my company from nothing, which is more than you can say. You inherited everything and still nearly lost it all. You can't call in those loans, Richard blustered. It would destroy us. Destroy you. I laughed. Richard, I could write a check right now and buy Harrington Industries outright. But I don't want to destroy you. I wanted to be part of your family. I put up with 3 years of insults, condescension, and cruelty because I loved your son. I stood up, gathering my documents. But trying to humiliate me at a family dinner? Calling me a gold digger in front of everyone? That's unforgivable. Amelia, wait. Daniel stood too. Let's talk about this. Oh, we'll talk, I assured him. But first, your parents have a decision to make. They can apologize, genuinely apologize, for 3 years of treating me like garbage. They can welcome me into this family with the respect I deserve. Or they can pay back $3.2 million in 30 days and find a new investor willing to deal with their charming personalities. Cassandra, who'd been silent through the revelations, suddenly burst out. You've been lying to us all this time. You're a fraud. No, I corrected. I'm a self-made millionaire who fell in love with your brother despite his obnoxious family. You're the one who married for money and spends her days spending her husband's wealth while contributing nothing. Between the two of us, who's really the gold digger? Her husband, who'd been quietly drinking throughout the drama, actually snorted with laughter. She's got a point, Cass. Eleanor sank into her chair, the post-nuptial agreement crumpling in her hands. We didn't know. That's the point, I said. You didn't know anything about me, but you judged me anyway. You deemed me unworthy based on assumptions and prejudice. You could have just been kind. You could have given me a chance. Instead, you chose cruelty. I looked around the table at the stunned faces of their guests. Happy birthday, Eleanor. I hope it's memorable. As I walked toward the door, Daniel caught my arm. Amelia, please. Don't leave. I looked at my husband, the man I'd fallen in love with, who'd never cared about money, but whose family obsessed over it. I'm going home. When you're ready to talk, really talk, you know where to find me. But understand this. I will never sit at a table where I'm disrespected again. Either I'm family, or I'm your largest creditor. Your parents can choose. I left the estate with my head high, leaving behind a room full of shattered assumptions and one very shocked family. My phone started buzzing before I even reached my car. Daniel, Eleanor, Richard, all calling frantically. I ignored them all. The next morning, Richard Harrington was at my office building at 7 a.m., looking haggard. Security called up to ask if they should let him in. Send him up, I said. He entered my actual office, not the small cubicle I'd described to Daniel, but the corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. His eyes widened as he took in the awards on the walls, the original artwork, the obvious signs of success I'd hidden for so long. Amelia, he began, then stopped. Miss Chen. Amelia is fine, I said, gesturing for him to sit. Coffee. He nodded mutely. I poured him a cup from my Italian espresso machine. I've been up all night, he admitted. Going through the contracts, talking to our CFO. It's all true. You saved us. And we treated you abominably. Yes, you did, I agreed simply. Eleanor is devastated. Not just about the money, though that's terrifying, but about how wrong we were. She's been crying all night. And you? I asked. Are you here because you're scared of losing the money, or because you genuinely regret how you treated me? He was quiet for a long moment. Both, he admitted finally. I'd be lying if I said the financial aspect didn't terrify me. But seeing Daniel last night, I've never seen him so hurt. Not because you have money, but because we made you feel like you had to hide who you are. Because our prejudice nearly cost him the woman he loves. Nearly? I raised an eyebrow. He's in the lobby, Richard confessed. I asked him to let me come up first. To apologize. Amelia, I'm sorry. We're sorry. We judged you based on your appearance, your background, our own snobbish assumptions. You've shown more grace and restraint than we deserved. You could have destroyed us at any point in the last 3 years, but instead, You endured our insults with dignity. I endured them for Daniel, I corrected. But everyone has their limits. I understand, he said. We'd like a chance to make things right. Not because of the money, though I won't pretend that's not a factor, but because you're right. You should be family. Real family. I studied him for a long moment. Send Daniel up. You and I will talk more later about the business arrangements. For now, I need to speak with my husband. Richard left, and minutes later, Daniel appeared. He looked exhausted, emotional, and confused. $42 million was the first thing he said. Give or take, I shrugged. Market fluctuations, you know. He laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to it. Do I even know you? You know me better than anyone, I said softly. You know that I hate olives but love olive oil. You know I cry at dog movies but not sad endings. You know I steal all the covers but always make sure your feet are tucked in. The money, that's just numbers and accounts. It's not who I am. Why didn't you tell me? At first, because I wanted you to love me for me. Then, because I was scared. Your family already hated me for being poor. How would they react to finding out I was rich? Would they suddenly be nice? Would you feel emasculated? Would everything change? He crossed the room and took my hands. I need to know, did you really fall in love with me at that conference? Or was it because of the company connection? Daniel, I said gently, I had no idea who you were at that conference. I didn't research Harrington Industries until after we'd been dating for 2 months. When I realized the connection, I almost broke up with you to avoid any conflict of interest. But by then, I was already in love. And you put up with my family's treatment for 3 years. Because I loved you more than I hated their behavior. But last night was too much. I won't be bullied into signing away rights to protect their prejudices. I won't be humiliated for their entertainment. I deserve better. You do, he agreed immediately. God, Amelia, I'm so sorry. I should have seen it, should have stood up for you more. I wanted so badly for everyone to get along that I minimized how cruel they were being. We talked for hours. About the money, the company, the future. About how to move forward and whether his family could truly change. About trust and honesty and the strange dynamics wealth creates. In the end, I didn't call in the loans. But I did claim my board seat. The first meeting with Eleanor and Richard as my fellow board members was awkward, but educational. They learned quickly that the poor nobody they'd dismissed had insights and connections that could transform their company. It took time to rebuild trust. Eleanor had to confront her own classism and prejudice. Richard had to accept that his son's wife was more successful than he'd ever be. Cassandra, well, she still makes snide comments, but now I respond by offering to review her husband's portfolio pro bono, which usually shuts her up. Daniel and I moved to a new house, one we chose together, that reflected both our styles. He still insists on paying for date nights sometimes, and I let him because I understand it's not about the money but about the gesture. He's also started his own company, funded by his own savings, not my wealth, because he wants to build something himself. The transformation wasn't overnight. There were family therapy sessions, awkward dinners, and more than a few heated arguments. But gradually, the Harringtons learned to see me as a person rather than a bank account. Ironically, the same lesson I'd hoped to teach by hiding my wealth in the first place. Eleanor now introduces me as our brilliant daughter-in-law who saved the family business. She even asked for investment advice for her personal portfolio, which felt like a small miracle. Richard consults me on major business decisions and recently admitted I have better instincts than he does. The last family dinner was different. No insults, no condescension, no attempts to humiliate anyone. Just a family sharing a meal, with all its imperfections and complications. When Eleanor raised her wine glass for a toast, everyone tensed slightly, remembering the birthday disaster. To family, she said simply. And to second chances. I raised my glass in return. To family, I agreed. And to honesty. The poor nobody they'd tried to chase away now sits on their board, holds their financial future, and most importantly, loves their son. They learned that wealth isn't about inheritance or pedigree. It's about value in all its forms. And sometimes the poorest person in the room might just be the one with the most money, but the least class. As for that postnuptial agreement, Eleanor had it framed as a reminder, she says, of how wrong first impressions can be and how dangerous prejudice is. It hangs in the Harrington Industries boardroom, a monument to the day they nearly lost everything by judging a book by its cover. The gold digger they thought they knew turned out to be a gold mine they never saw coming. And the best part, I would have loved them just as much if they'd simply been kind from the start. Money might talk, but respect speaks volumes.